What does it take to walk away from the spotlight, not in failure, but in defiance? During Hollywood's golden era, countless stars played along. They smiled for the cameras, accepted the roles, and surrendered to the system that promised immortality in exchange for obedience. But among them stood a rare few who refused, not out of scandal, but out of principle. This is not a story of career flameouts or dramatic meltdowns. These are the performers who made a conscious choice to protect their soul, their values, their voice. They didn't disappear because they had to. They disappeared because they chose to. Take Katharine Hepburn, who discarded gowns for slacks and said no to the industry's vision of womanhood. Or Sidney Poitier, who would rather go without work than take a role that diminished his dignity. And then there's Gene Hackman, who quietly stepped away from the industry without press releases or parting tributes. In a world where silence often signals submission, they used it to reclaim power. These are 20 stars who didn't just walk away from Hollywood's game, they turned their backs on it entirely. Not because they couldn't play, but because they didn't want to. Fact has own, Katharine Hepburn. She wore what she wanted and made history. She didn't just challenge dress codes. She challenged the entire system. At a time when femininity was defined by curled hair and tight corsets, Katharine Hepburn walked into studios in trousers and confidence. She refused to conform to the dainty, obedient starlet mold that dominated the era. Her independence wasn't performative, it was unrelenting. Executives labeled her difficult, and audiences initially recoiled. But Hepburn stood firm. When her slacks were confiscated on set, she made a statement by walking around in her underwear until they were returned. She wasn't staging a rebellion. She was just being herself. Hollywood tried to punish her. The press mocked her. But eventually, the roles came, ones that didn't shrink her, but matched her stature. Hepburn didn't win the game. She rewrote the rules so she didn't have to play. Fact #2. Sidney Poitier, dignity or nothing at all. His principles were never for sale. Sidney Poitier emerged in an industry that routinely typecast black actors into servile or comic roles. But he wouldn't bend. If a script insulted his identity, he rejected it even if that meant months without work, even when it risked his rising career. He demanded that his characters carry honor, strength, and humanity. In doing so, he forced studios to confront their prejudices and audiences to reconsider their assumptions. Some saw him as too serious, too proud, too bold for his time. But Poitier never softened. He carved out a space where he could act with integrity, and if Hollywood didn't like it, so be it. He wasn't just choosing roles, he was drawing a line that would never be crossed. Fact #3. James Cagney, the contract rebel Hollywood didn't see coming. He looked like a company man. He acted like a revolutionary. James Cagney became one of Warner Brothers' biggest stars in the 1,930 seconds, known for his explosive energy and tough guy charm. But behind the scenes, he was quietly preparing for a showdown. He hated the suffocating contracts that chained actors to the studios and left them powerless over their own careers. In a move that stunned the industry, he sued Warner Brothers and won. Later, he secretly supported the formation of the Screen Actors Guild, advocating for better rights and fairer treatment for performers. He never shouted, never staged a public fight. But every move he made chipped away at the power structure from within. Cagney didn't just act tough on screen. He proved it off-screen where it mattered most. Fact #4. Faye Dunaway. She was brilliant and refused to behave. She didn't want to be adored. She wanted to be respected. Faye Dunaway didn't arrive in Hollywood to play by anyone else's script on screen or off. From the start, she demanded roles that portrayed women with depth and fire, not just beauty and charm. When directors handed her lines that insulted her intelligence, she changed them. When producers tried to tame her ambition, she resisted. She quickly earned a reputation for being temperamental. But behind the label was a woman who refused to let herself be reduced to a one-dimensional stereotype. In an industry that rewarded compliance, Dunaway stood out and stood alone. She didn't want to be easy to work with. She wanted to be unforgettable, and that made her dangerous to a system built on obedience. Fact #5. Sean Connery, the man who walked away from a legend. He became a global icon and then left it all behind. Sean Connery was James Bond. But that's precisely what he didn't want to be forever. After a string of wildly successful films, he made the radical decision to step away, even when the offers grew bigger and the paychecks doubled. He felt the role was limiting, hollow, and increasingly disconnected from who he was. Connery craved complexity. not caricature. He turned his back on the tuxedo and martinis in search of something real. He later returned, but only once, and strictly on his term. He didn't resent Bond, he resented being owned by it. Fact #6, Joanne Woodward, stardom wasn't the goal. She had the acclaim, she had the awards, and yet she quietly disappeared. Joanne Woodward's breakthrough performance earned her an Oscar and a path to superstardom. But instead of chasing red carpets and magazine covers, she stepped aside. Not because she couldn't keep up, but because she didn't want to. While Hollywood expected her to ride the momentum, she focused on her family, her craft, and a quieter kind of fulfillment. She took roles selectively, avoided the spotlight, and resisted the celebrity machinery that consumed so many of her peers. In a town obsessed with visibility, she proved that purpose mattered more than presence. She didn't vanish, she simply chose to live off camera. Fact #7, John Cassavetes, the star who tore up the blueprint. He didn't just challenge Hollywood's rules, he built something else entirely. John Cassavetes could have enjoyed a long, safe career playing roles handed to him by the studio system, but he grew restless. The characters were shallow, the stories fake. He didn't want to be a puppet in someone else's production, so he created his own. He directed films in his own home. He financed projects with his own savings. He cast his friends and shot with handheld cameras. His films were rough, intimate, and honest. Everything Hollywood wasn't. Cassavetes didn't scream rebellion. He simply ignored the gatekeepers and built a door of his own. And through that door, independent cinema was born. Versed. Fact #8, Deborah Winger, the actress who refused to be processed. She lit up the screen, then walked away before it burned her out. Deborah Winger was a force in the 1,980 seconds, delivering raw, magnetic performances that earned her both acclaim and box office success. But behind the scenes, she was outspoken about her discomfort with the industry's artificiality. She didn't want to play Hollywood's game of small talk, stylists, and smiling through scripts she couldn't stand. So she left, just like that. No scandal, no meltdown, just a quiet exit from a system she found unbearable. They called her difficult, but the truth was simpler. She just couldn't fake it and wouldn't try. Fact #9, Jessica Lange. Beauty wasn't enough, she wanted substance. She was offered the spotlight. She asked for shadows. Jessica Lange was introduced to the world in King Kong, a role built around her looks. She could have followed the path of so many blonde bombshells before her easy scripts, fast fame, shallow characters, but Lange rejected that destiny. She sought out dark, complex roles that terrified studios but thrilled critics. She waited years between projects if it meant protecting her voice. And when the offers dried up, she didn't complain, she simply refused to settle. Lange wasn't chasing attention. She was searching for truth, and she found it on her own terms. Fact #0, George C. Scott, the actor who rejected applause. He earned the most coveted prize in acting and wanted no part of it. George C. Scott's performance in Patton was explosive, iconic, and unforgettable. The Academy agreed, awarding him Best Actor. But Scott had no interest in the ceremony, the cameras, or the celebration. In fact, he warned the Oscars in advance, "Don't give it to me." They did anyway. He stayed home. To Scott, acting was not a competition. The glitz of award season cheapened the work he cherished. He didn't need a golden statue to know his worth, and he wasn't willing to validate a system he didn't respect. He didn't walk away from success. He turned his back on spectacle. Fact #9, Gene Wilder. He left the stage before the curtain fell. He made the world laugh, then chose silence over applause. Gene Wilder became a legend through roles filled with wonder and chaos. But behind the eccentric charm was a man increasingly disillusioned with what the industry was becoming. The films felt louder, emptier, the stories less human. So he stepped back, quietly. No farewell press tour, no dramatic announcement, just a slow disappearance into art, writing, and a life unburdened by performance. Wilder didn't crave attention. He craved meaning, and when Hollywood lost it, he moved on. Fact #2, Albert Finney, the star who refused the spotlight. He was nominated again and again, but never showed up to collect. Albert Finney was never interested in playing the fame game. While his peers dressed for red carpets and posed for photographers, he chose privacy. He skipped ceremonies. He refused to hire publicists. He turned down titles and interviews with a polite shrug. To him, acting was a job, a craft to be practiced, not promoted. Finney's absence from the spotlight only deepened his mystery, and that mystery made him all the more magnetic. He didn't disappear. He simply refused to perform outside the frame. Walked off the map and never looked back. Hasson 3, Julie Christie. She walked off the map and never looked back. She could have ruled the screen for decades. Instead, she vanished into the quiet. Julie Christie was the face of an era ethereal, sharp, unforgettable. Hollywood adored her. But the more the industry tried to possess her, the more she slipped away. She declined major roles, stopped chasing headlines, and eventually retreated to a remote life, far from studios and scripts. She didn't leave in bitterness. She left with clarity, recognizing early that what Hollywood offered wasn't what she needed. Christie didn't fade away. She chose another kind of life, one with no audience. Fact Hasson 4, Catherine Ross, a voice that refused to echo. She became an icon overnight, and then she quietly declined the rest. After The Graduate, Catherine Ross could have had her pick of parts. Instead, she turned down script after script, uninterested in playing the same shallow roles dressed in different names. The studio system didn't punish her, it simply stopped calling. She didn't fight the silence, she embraced it. Ross wasn't trying to prove a point. She was protecting something: her creative integrity, her sense of self, and her right to say no. And in an industry where visibility is currency, her absence became its own form of protest. AGAT, Fact Hasson 5, Alec Guinness, the reluctant icon. He became immortal in a role he resented. Sir Alec Guinness gave the world Obi-Wan Kenobi and regretted it almost immediately. To him, Star Wars was a machine, and he was one part he couldn't unscrew. He found the dialogue trite, the fame invasive, the fans overwhelming. Despite earning a fortune from the franchise, he never embraced the celebrity it brought. He avoided interviews, declined conventions, and discouraged fans from quoting lines at him. Guinness didn't hate acting. He hated how easily it could swallow a person whole. And so, he withdrew not in shame, but in quiet resistance. Fact Hasson XX, Paul Newman. He gave it all away, and that was the point. He was admired, adored, immortalized, and none of it mattered to him. Paul Newman could have spent his later years collecting honors, touring award shows, and basking in his legacy. Instead, he built something else. He funneled the profits from his salad dressing empire, his endorsements, and even his film salaries into charities that help children, education, and medical research. He didn't seek applause for it. He barely talked about it. While others clung to their star image, Newman dismantled his piece by piece until all that remained was the work he left behind. He didn't abandon fame. He redirected it into something far more lasting. Fact Hasson 7, Jane Alexander, punished for speaking when silence was safer. She spoke her truth, and Hollywood turned its back. Jane Alexander was no stranger to acclaim, but in the 1,980 seconds, as tensions rose in politics and culture, she refused to remain quiet. She criticized government censorship, defended the arts, and aligned herself with causes that made studios nervous. She never threw a tantrum. She simply wouldn't stay quiet. The offers stopped coming. The roles dried up. But Alexander didn't shrink. She shifted. She went into arts advocacy, led public institutions, and continued to speak boldly about what mattered. She didn't fall out of favor. She was exiled for having a spine. Fact Hasson 8, Tim Robbins, the actor who paid for having a voice. He wasn't blacklisted, but he might as well have been. After the Shawshank Redemption, Tim Robbins was everywhere. But instead of basking in stardom, he took to podiums, questioning wars, defending civil liberties, and calling out hypocrisy within the very industry that made him. The backlash was immediate. Studios distanced themselves. Collaborations evaporated. The spotlight dimmed. But Robbins kept going, choosing integrity over opportunity. "If telling the truth hurts my career," he said, "then so be it." He didn't just refuse to play the game. He refused to pretend it wasn't rigged. Fact Hasson, Marsha Mason. She fought back where no one was looking. She didn't just resist the roles, she resisted the rules behind them. Marsha Mason was a 4-time Oscar nominee with a reputation for heart, nuance, and grace. But when the cameras stopped rolling, she became something else entirely. An advocate, a strategist, a voice pushing back against a system stacked against women, especially those over 40. She demanded better scripts. She demanded equitable treatment. And she called out the behind-the-scenes silence that enabled abuse and exclusion. Studios didn't argue. They just stopped calling. She didn't burn out. She was simply too aware and too honest to be tolerated. Fact #20, Gene Hackman, the exit no one saw coming. One of the most respected actors of his generation, and he vanished without ceremony. Gene Hackman left acting the same way he entered it, on his own terms. No farewell interviews, no emotional send-off. Just the quiet decision to stop. He said filmmaking no longer excited him. The process had grown mechanical, the scripts uninspired. He didn't hate Hollywood, he had just outgrown it. So he left, moved to New Mexico, rode his bike, wrote novels, lived a life that didn't depend on the next call from a casting director. Hackman didn't disappear because he failed. He disappeared because he knew exactly when to leave. Bonus fact, Barbara Loden. She made one film, then walked away forever. She didn't burn out. She lit one match and left it to burn on its own. Barbara Loden wasn't a household name. She never headlined blockbuster film. But in 1970, she wrote, directed, and starred in Wanda, a raw, haunting portrait of a woman drifting through life's margins. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't pretty. It was true. The industry didn't know what to do with it. Critics were confused. Studios were silent. Loden, however, didn't wait around. She refused to commercialize the film, refused to reshape it into something marketable, and refused to play the role of a breakthrough female auteur just to fit a trend. She never made another film. Some say Hollywood ignored her, but the truth is, she ignored Hollywood first. And in that quiet refusal, Wanda became immortal, a whispered revolution from someone who never wanted a throne. They didn't walk away in shame. They walked away because they refused to be shaped. In an industry built on performance, not just in front of the camera, but behind closed doors, these stars chose something harder than staying, letting go. Some lost everything. Others found something deeper. None of them begged to be remembered. But now that you've heard their stories, which one would you have followed, the spotlight or the silent? Let us know in the comments. And maybe, just maybe, the real legacy isn't in what they achieved, but in what they refused to become.